Okay, welcome to this month's Alzheimer's Live Chat. My name is Kat Koehler. I'm with Home Instead Senior Care, who's bringing you these live chats every month. Thank you for joining us. We're going to be discussing Caregiving Challenges with Molly Carpenter. Before we dive into your questions, I want to note a few things about today's chat. All of your lines have been muted, so don't worry about background noise. If you need to multitask while you're listening, go right ahead and do that. You can submit your questions to Molly by typing them into the question section. And then when the webinar is done, you'll receive in the next couple of days an email that includes a link to the recorded chat as well as links to other resources that we mention throughout the event. So make sure you look for that. Now let's talk a little bit about who you'll be hearing today. As I mentioned earlier, I'm Kat Koehler. I'm the social media advocate for Home Instead Senior Care. I have the honor of interacting with all of you on Facebook and Twitter and blogs, and of course, each month in our live chats. I'm really excited to welcome my friend Molly Carpenter back to our live chats. I have the pleasure of working with Molly here at Home Instead Senior Care. She is a critical component to our team that is responsible for making sure our Home Instead caregivers all over the world have all the resources they need to deliver the best quality care. Molly and the team also work to make sure that our caregivers have the best experience possible and understand the importance that their work enhancing the lives of those they serve really provides. Molly's work as part of the team that developed a person-centered approach to Alzheimer's care has been adopted globally and is critical to the success of the Home Instead Care approach for people with Alzheimer's and other dementias. In 2013, Molly authored Confidence to Care, a resource for family caregivers providing Alzheimer's disease and other dementias care at home. Confidence to Care is the essential handbook for family caregivers like you, offering practical insights to understanding, managing, and preventing the behavioral symptoms associated with the disease. The book includes touching personal stories along with really practical and easy to access tips and techniques drawn from decades of caregiving experience by internationally recognized experts. Molly, welcome to our chat.
Thank you, Kat. Thanks for that very warm welcome, and I'm so excited to be here today to visit with you and with all of our family caregivers that are listening.
Yeah, it's a really great time I think it's February. This is the time that we all start to forget about our New Year's resolutions, and I hope a lot of caregivers had the resolution to maybe take better care of themselves. So hopefully, usually we get some questions and we can touch on that, on some different ways that caregivers can take care of themselves. Go ahead.
Sorry, Kat. That is a wise advice, and you're exactly right. I know I've already forgotten about my New Year's resolution, so I imagine a lot of caregivers have as well, and I really hope at the top of that list was taking more time for themselves and really trying to find, even if it's 5 minutes a day, just to take an opportunity to unwind, to find some calmness of the day, find some peace, and even find ways to celebrate being a caregiver every single day. This is a beautiful journey, and it's a beautiful role, and it's a very challenging role at times, but it can be a very fulfilling role. So I'm very excited today to visit and talk with people today about some of their questions and some of their struggles, and hopefully we can help out and find more resources today as well.
Awesome. And Molly, you are known to have some great tips and really practical, real-life solutions to some of the challenges. But I know that our caregivers who have joined us on the chat today also have some great tips. So I encourage all of you, if you are online watching the webinar, if you have any tips to share with another caregiver who's asking a question, feel free to put those in um, to into the question section, and we want to share your tips throughout this hour as well. Molly, let's jump in. We have one of the ways caregivers reach out to us and can submit questions is via email, and that email address is livechat@homeinstead.com. And this question came in, and it's a little long, so but I think it's a really important question, and hopefully we can provide some help. Here's the question. My husband is now 60. He has been diagnosed for 5 years, but I know he has had the disease for at least 2 more years. Due to the insurance company denial of testing and the doctor's misdiagnoses, it has financially ruined us. His mother died of the disease, and we later found out a cousin also has it. I am still finding it hard to find adequate medical care for my husband. How can you find someone who understands the problems for early onset? Most doctors believe whatever my husband tells them, even if it's wrong. My husband gets so angry when I have to correct him in front of people. He physically still feels fine and capable. Mentally, he's headed for stage 3. I am always walking a fine line between days he is still here and days he is gone. I feel I can do nothing right. Either I help too much or not enough. There will be some days I think I am wrong when he dresses himself for a few days at a time. He never dresses appropriately, but he does dress himself. Then days he refuses to eat, lasting up to 3 days at a time. When should I worry over this? How do I prepare for what happens next? He's very clingy and gets upset if I leave him too long. Physically, he's in better shape than I am and honestly could outlive me. So she's got a lot going on there, Molly.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you, first of all, to the caregiver who sent this question in. This is, like Kat, I agree with you. This is a very good question, and it covers many, many different areas. So I was kind of taking notes during the question. I'm just going to go down the list and sort of address each concern that this caregiver sent in. First, I do want to say how sorry I am to hear about misdiagnoses and things like financial hardships. That's got to be incredibly hard for any family caregiver to encounter. And I do think that early onset is one of those areas that is, it's tough. It's tougher. It's more challenging. And I do think that there are people, a lot of our doctors and our primary care physicians, they are not well versed in early onset, usually. So my first tip would be, I think you should consider seeing a geriatrician, which is a specialist that really works just on senior issues. And there are geriatricians throughout the United States. I actually refer to a Google search that I did on U.S. News and World Report. They have a list of all of the geriatricians in the United States, and it is searchable by state. So I would definitely start there with thinking about the right doctor and getting diagnosed properly and really getting some extra resources that you might need. Another great resource, and I think, Kat, you would agree with this one, is that the Alzheimer'S Association in the local area, they sometimes have those early onset, or what sometimes they call them younger onset now. They have support groups just for those types of family caregivers because it is such a unique difference and there are some different challenges that are associated with it. So I would definitely encourage reaching out to an Alzheimer's association in your area, asking for additional resources and maybe seeing if there's a support group. Now, I want to go to the point of the question about correcting him, because I do think this is a really hard one, and I think this is hard for a lot of family caregivers, even if you don't have dementia. If you're just dealing with a senior loved one, sometimes you want to correct them. Maybe they're moving too slow or they said the wrong thing. So correcting is a very hard one, and I think Sometimes it's absolutely necessary, but sometimes it's not always necessary. And I think this caregiver gave us a great example of how sometimes it's not necessary, and that's when she said that her husband sometimes dressed himself, and he doesn't do it right, or maybe he has mismatched clothes, but at least he dresses himself. That is a perfect example of when it's okay to let it go, and it's okay that he doesn't match perfectly if he's at home or whatever. So it's sort of getting into the habit of really trying to figure out, is it necessary to absolutely correct the person or not? And let me give you another example. I recall a time when I was working with somebody with Alzheimer's disease, and this person was convinced it was Saturday because there was a certain TV show on. And really, it was a Tuesday. And the show was on a video. It was a Lawrence Welk video. So the show was on, and it was a video. And so there was no need to correct this person and say, no, it's Tuesday, because it just really didn't matter at that point. Another example that I've used before is I've been out to a diner with a person with Alzheimer's disease, and the waitress came up to our table, and she started to talk, and she started to ask our order. And the person that I was with said, called her Judy, which was this person's sister. And instead of correcting the person with Alzheimer's in front of the waitress and say, no, 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 that's not Judy, that's not your sister, I looked at the person's name tag and I said, I forget the gal's name, I think it was Cindy or something, and I said, you're right, Cindy looks a lot like your sister Judy. And I just sort of had to quickly think on my feet and really come up with a way that wasn't going to embarrass the person, and the waitress probably then could put some context around the situation. So I guess I would really, I applaud this caregiver for writing in and already recognizing those times when it's not necessary to absolutely correct somebody or if they're wrong. So I just think if you can be conscious of it and really try to think about it, sometimes it's going to work out. Sometimes you're going to have to do a little bit of correcting, but just thinking about doing it in the most dignified manner, that's all you can do, and you can't beat yourself up for that if you do have to make a correction.
Yeah, and I think, asking yourself, is what they just said, is their belief that's inaccurate? Is it detrimental to their safety or their well-being? If it's not, then, we hear it all the time. Sometimes you've got to live in their world.
Absolutely. That's a great point, and that's exactly what I mean. You've got to just really think about, is this going to make or break the situation or not? Excellent point. I do want to address one more point from this caregiver that wrote such a thoughtful email in, and really about the eating, because I think that's another concern that a lot of caregivers are having, and maybe a lot of caregivers that are listening right now. Refusing to eat, and I think this caregiver mentioned it's 3 days at a time.
Right.
That is concerning, and
scary.
That can be scary, and I understand the worry. And I guess I've heard a lot of tips from families on this one, and I'm just going to share a couple of those. And Kat, maybe you've heard these as well. But I've heard families leaving food out invisible on counters, and I'm talking about fruit. I'm even talking about a sandwich. I'm talking about finger foods that can be easily grabbed throughout the day. So if the person walks by, there's something readily available. I've heard this tip a lot. Of course, you've got to change that out each night and fix it every day. But I've heard that tip a lot. I've also heard, I've heard a couple of family caregivers tell me this, where they take the person to the actual grocery store if that's still possible. And yes, the family caregiver might even go at an odd time of the day, so it's not very crowded. But just visually seeing food, smelling food, maybe the bakery going, yes. Samples at the grocery store. I mean, I've had family members take their loved one to Costco or Sam's Club or whatever those big stores are where there's samples readily available. And so I've really gotten creative with some of those different ideas with how to help people get their loved one to eat, and especially not wait 3 days.
Right, right.
I think the smell is a big thing. So if you need to bake cookies, or you need to make some onions, or along with the dinner you're preparing. Really think about some of those smells that's going to stimulate that the brain signals that, oh, I need food, I'm hungry, or my stomach's growling. So I think a lot of those are ways to think about encouraging food. I don't know, Kat, if you've ever heard of other tips as well.
Yeah, those are great tips. And I think even saying, hey, I need to, go get lunch ready. Can you help me? Getting them
Yes.
in the kitchen and doing something, and even if they have no intentions of eating, actually interacting and touching that food, it's another one of those signals of, I need to eat. Oh, I am hungry. So if any of you have tips on how to encourage your loved ones to eat, that would be great. We do have a couple of tips that have come in for this question from Robert. He agrees, Molly, those simple foods are best, right? Something they can grab, dense nutrition. Maybe it's something like a granola bar, right? Something that's got some good oats and maybe some dried fruit in it. Really easy to eat.
Yes, great idea.
And another thing that came in, small plates and fewer items on the plate. Molly, you and I have talked about the color of the plate. Do you want to talk briefly about that?
Yes, that's a really great point. When you think about the color of the plates, and basically it's all about the contrast. So if you have, I want you to picture kind of a white or an ivory dinner plate, and then you put some chicken on there and maybe some mashed potatoes, and everything all of a sudden to a person with Alzheimer's is blending together, and you can't really see the difference in the contrast. This is all has to do with the disease and the brain failing. So it's important that Fiestaware that's out in the stores, or even a colored paper plates, anything that just has a little bit of contrast to really make the chicken breast or the mashed potatoes pop on that plate, to really get them to notice what is there, is a big help. Also, the size of the plate. I love the small plate idea, and just putting a couple things on at once. When there's a big plate in front of you with a lot of items on it, it can be overwhelming to somebody that has Alzheimer's disease or dementia. So I think that was a great tip. I've also heard another one from a family caregiver around really over-exaggerating how great everything tastes, or saying things like, this is so wonderful, I haven't had this good of a sandwich in a long time, or boy, I was really, really thirsty. I feel so much better that I just drank this glass of water or tea or whatever. So really over-exaggerating how you're feeling as you're eating that food might entice somebody to start to want to eat a little bit more too.
Yeah, and I think if you're getting to the point where you're worrying about the nutrition or the lack of nutrition at this point, put a call into your doctor's office. Oftentimes they, might recommend maybe some supplements. Carmen offered the tip. She uses some of the supplemental drinks like Boost.
Yes.
When her loved one when her husband wouldn't eat, and that was something he would always drink. So
that is a great idea, and you're right. Definitely call the doctor. 3 days is time to call the doctor if you can't have success on that third day. Definitely time.
Yep. Molly, let's go on to another question here that came in. I believe it came in via email.
Okay.
And here's the question. My mother is in an assisted living facility. She is constantly asking for pieces of furniture, rugs, and her jewelry. I try to change the subject, but find it very difficult. Then she has days of being very insulting to the staff and to me as well. She doesn't want to get out of bed until mid-afternoon and has tray service for most of her meals. Please help. What do you think?
Okay. Yes, that's a great question, and I've actually worked in assisted living facilities, and I know exactly this person I'm picturing. I've got a few examples in my mind of this person. One of the things about if she's asking about pieces of furniture and rugs and jewelry, a lot of facilities allow those things to bring your own personal touches. So I'd first ask that question, but if that is, probably have already asked it, and probably the answer might be no, but if that's the case, I've often seen families have pictures of the pieces with family members. So if they're asking for a certain chair, and maybe it's their favorite chair, maybe there's a picture that the family could bring of the person holding their grandchild in that chair. You know, just something familiar. I think when people are asking for those types of items, it's because they're looking for something familiar. They're looking for reminders from their everyday life.
Yes.
So think of it that way, yes. And as far as jewelry goes, that's a very tough one. And you obviously don't want to bring jewelry a fear of be getting lost or misplaced or hidden. And so I've seen a lot of times where families try to find costume jewelry that's very similar to the piece that they're asking for. And then it's okay if that piece does get misplaced or lost or whatever, if the person hides it and we can't find it. So those are my suggestions. I do want to talk about this is tough when they are insulting. It's so hard to be a family caregiver when the person you're caring for is mad at you or is insulting you or is having a tough day. And so a couple of things around that is, again, since this person emailed the question and we don't know if this is a new situation or not. So if it is a new situation, I would like to say to that family caregiver, got to just give it a little bit of time to adjust, first of all. And think about a person with dementia or Alzheimer's disease. They are in a constant state of change, and they wake up, you know, every day, and and throughout the day, they're unfamiliar with things, and it can be a little frightening at times. So when a person's scared, or a person is insulting or yelling or angry at the staff or at yourself, I think there's something behind that, and that's where we really have to think about what need is not being met. When a person has Alzheimer's disease or dementia, there's usually an unmet need that is behind some of these behavioral symptoms or some of these types of situations. So when she's doing that and she's having a bad day, the disease might just be a really hard day for her. And on those days where she's not in a bad mood and not yelling, she's feeling good and maybe has remembered a little bit more than she has in the past. And so I think it's hard. And when I worked in that type of a setting, we really had to get to know the person, and this family caregiver is really going to have to help the staff get creative with ways to sort of entice her out of bed. A couple of things that we've used in the past, definitely we've turned to food, a favorite meal. We've turned to, you know, your friend's going to visit today, so the family caregiver or the facility would call and invite a friend for lunch, you know, and tell the person your friend's coming to visit for lunch. It could even be, I know one that always got a lot of our residents going was a hair appointment, or an errand that they looked forward to running, or a grandchild visiting. So
yes.
I just encourage family caregivers to think about those things that bring their person joy, what's going to help them motivate to get out of bed and to not do the tray service and to kind of be in a little bit better of a mood.
I love it. There are two things that you said, Molly, that I really want our listeners to hear again. And if you get the book Confidence to Care, it's something you will see throughout the entire book. And that is, does the person have an unmet need that is causing this? So is there, you know, and Molly, in the book you go through, you know, is there an emotional, a social, a physical, environmental? Are they missing somebody? Are they in pain? Are they too hot, too cold? So it can, you know, it can very well be something that's an easy fix.
Yes, you're exactly right, Kat. And in this situation, describing that she's asking for familiar things, and then there's days where she's really upset, she still just may be adjusting to the her new environment, and that it's a different area. Maybe she's not used to the noise in the hallways from the other residents, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So again, understanding what that need is, what she's feeling, because she's with dementia, she's not always able to articulate exactly what is happening and how she's feeling. So you're exactly right.
Perfect. The other thing you said that I think is so important is, you know, trying to, you know, remind yourself what brings your loved one joy.
Yes.
And while they may behave like a different person than they once did, they have a long life of things that very much may still bring them joy. I know for my grandmother, she had her standing hair appointment at 9 o'clock on Tuesday mornings, and she loved having her hair done. She loved being able to hear from their grandkids on the phone, and she loved just talking to people, so entertaining somebody. So,
yes.
Finding those little nuggets of, what makes mom, and how do we celebrate that still today?
Yes, and Kat, you are exactly right. And just we're saying about visiting with people or grandkids. Even if it's a phone call, like you said, it doesn't need to be this big planned visit and big party. It's if your loved one knows every day at 2 o'clock the grandkids get home from school and they're going to call for 15 minutes, that could be enough to motivate them to get going and get out of bed and get going for the day. I've had residents, this is going to sound crazy, but I've had people and residents that I've cared for in facilities where it was a simple, their favorite Earl Grey tea with milk, and they can't drink tea in bed without it spilling everywhere. And so it's just those little comforts. So when we're talking about these, what brings joy, we don't have to think about the trip they took to Europe, although pulling out pictures from the trip they took to Europe could be a motivator to get them out of bed. But my point is, and I think, Kat, what you're saying too, is just think about the little things that makes mom, mom. I mean, I love how you said that. That's exactly right.
So a couple of days ago, Molly, I asked on our Remember for Alzheimer's Facebook page for our friends to let us know what their caregiving challenges were. And one of the responses was so just on the nose, and I think probably a universal feeling for so many caregivers. And that response was, the caregiving challenges, I didn't realize I couldn't do everything, and now I'm burned out. Any tips on how to cope with this?
I love that you asked that question, and I love that a family caregiver wrote that in and said that, because you know what? First of all, I'm terribly sorry that person is feeling burnt out, and I'm sure a lot of you on the phone are burnt out, and it's really hard to admit that. It really is. But I'm really glad at the same time that this caregiver, and maybe some of you today, are realizing that you can't do it all. I can't do it all, and we all can't do it all. And I know our society tells us differently, but in this situation, you really can't do it all. And you've really got to take time to yourself, and if you want to be a really good caregiver, that's the bottom line. So the thing when it comes to coping, this is where it becomes pretty individualized. So when somebody's feeling burnt out, coping strategies are going to be different for everybody. So what I always encourage family caregivers to think about is some big goals or some big ideas, something big to look forward to. For example, maybe it's a vacation. And I know we can't go on vacation tomorrow, but we could call the travel agency tomorrow and get a brochure sent to the house to start with. We could think about some dates that might work. So think of something big that's going to really bring you pleasure, and start small steps to planning it is one thing that I always think about. But there's got to be something in everyday life that brings each of us joy. I know one of the things I love to do is read. So I try to take time, even if it's 10 minutes a day, to read. And as a family caregiver, 10 minutes might be what you get during the day to really have a moment to yourself. But during that 10 minutes, set an intentional break for yourself and pick up your book and just read. Don't think about anything else and read if that's your thing. So I always encourage family caregivers to really start with a list of things they love to do, a list of things that bring them joy, a list of things that make them calm. Maybe it's even exercise. That's a good way to think about getting some. And again, 10-minute walk or a 10 minutes on the treadmill, or even just while you're sitting there with the person watching TV, maybe you're doing some leg raises or some push-ups. I mean, just, again, you've got to get creative when you're in this caregiving role.
That's great.
I think another thing I'd like to point out is journaling. And I know journaling can sometimes sound like you're writing volumes of words every night, but I'm talking 10 minutes. I'm talking 5 minutes a day even. And really what journaling does, or even an exercise or some meditation could do for 5 minutes a day, is really help you calm your mind and wrap your mind around what's happening, and really help you come to some sort of peace throughout the day. So when you're taking those 10 minutes to yourself in complete silence, and maybe writing a few notes down or meditating or even exercising, really just let your mind calm, take those minutes to yourself. It's amazing what 10 minutes can do. And always remember to take deep breaths. I learned this from a family caregiver about how important it is to take deep breaths throughout the day. You just feel better by just a deep breath.
Absolutely. Molly, I recently wrote a blog post on caregiverstress.com about this topic, and it started when there was one day I was actually in my car at a stoplight thinking of literally everything I'm responsible for, everything I have to do, and it was so overwhelming. I mean, you start running through those lists.
Yes.
And it was really a frightening experience. And so one of the things that came of that was really evaluating each and every one of those things. And I looked at it as, what are the things I absolutely must do? So it's not no one else wants to do it, but it's there's going to be actual harm if I don't do this. And the other things I looked at is, what are the things people expect me to do? And I think as caregivers, we feel that a lot. Mom expects me to take her to her appointments. My siblings expect me to do this. And then the other list were the things that I think people expect me to do, right? Like sending out Christmas cards and thank you notes and things like that. The hardest list I had to write was the things that I want to do. Yes, we get so lost in all the things that we have to do that we forget there are things that I want to do. So I now literally have a list of things I enjoy doing for those times when I have some free time, whether it's 15 minutes or a full day. I can pull out my list and say, oh, I've been wanting to see this movie, or I've been meaning to call this friend. But I think to really mitigate that burnout, you really have to go through each one of those things you feel like you have to do and assign it a position. Do you have to do it? Do you want to do it? Is it something that you can delegate to somebody else? Or is it something you can just say, you know what, I'm not doing this. No harm will come if this doesn't get done.
I think that is excellent, and those are excellent points. And I agree with you that, and I feel like I'm going to go home tonight and do that list, Kat. Thank you for that, because I agree. That is just, there are so many expectations out there, and we all want to be perfect, and we all want to get, our house perfectly clean and everything just perfectly taken care of, and that just, it's not possible for anybody, despite what society tells us or what the past movies have told us, or whatever. Right. So I just think it's so important. That is a really good tip. And I hope, maybe Kat, one more time, why don't you review the categories again?
Okay, so here are the lists that I want you to put everything into. Things I must do, things people expect me to do, things I think people expect me to do, and things I want to do. And we'll include a link to to the blog post that goes into a little more detail of this blog post on the follow-up email that you'll all receive.
Excellent.
Okay, I cannot believe we are already 35 minutes into our chat. So we're going to just take a quick minute we've got a poll. We've got a question for all of our listeners, Molly. And as you know, we like getting feedback from all of you. We want to make sure that the chats that we bring you are valuable, that the content that we provide for you on our different resources is valuable. So the question we're asking today is, what kind of help do you have in your caregiving situation? Is it none? Do you have family members that help? Friends? Do you have volunteers? Or maybe you have a paid professional caregiver that helps. So, and you'll see the polls section on your panel. Open that up, and you can take our poll. We'll give you a minute to do that. Molly, we've got some more questions coming in, so I'm going to take a minute to review those while they do the poll. And in another minute here, we'll get back to answering all of your questions.
Great.
Molly, I want to go through, we've got some great tips that have come in. You know, we're talking about some of these stress busters. One of our listeners wants to remind us to make sure we're spending time with quote-unquote normal people. So our entire lives cannot become Alzheimer's disease or dementia or caregiver, right? We need to surround ourselves at times with people who aren't going through the same journey.
That's an excellent tip, and I would agree. And it kind of goes back to what we're saying about things you want to do. You've got to keep your friendships going. If you've had good friends, that's probably something going to be on your list that you want to do. So that's a great tip.
Okay. We are going to wrap up our poll. Thank you all for everybody who participated in the poll. Okay, we've got a new question that came in from Lisa. And her question is, recently my sister came to move my mom and I to live with her at her home in another state as the caregiving became too much for me on my own. My mom wanted to move, but since we are no longer in our own place, she's having a hard time adjusting and has been lashing out at times, mostly on me. Did we make a mistake in moving her? What do you think?
Well, Lisa, I would say that it sounds like it's a fairly new situation, and so I definitely think you need to give it a little bit of time to let everything settle. I do think, we talked about this a little bit earlier, she's probably unfamiliar with her situation. She probably, with Alzheimer's disease, there's some days where she understands that she moved and that she's in a new place, and she probably even knows why. But with Alzheimer's disease, you can't count on that every day. So on those days when she's really having a hard time and she's lashing out, those are those days where she's not remembering why that the move happened. And the reason she's looking to you, Lisa, is because you were the primary caregiver for a while and for so long, and she's most familiar with you, and that's the situation she remembers, is with you. And so I'm sorry that she is sort of taking it out on you and lashing it out on you, but I think you need to understand that you have to do what's right for you and your family. And the fact that your sister is available and willing to help and you are going on this journey with your sister, I think is tremendous. And and so on those days that are really tough and maybe your mom is taking some things out on you, I want you to remember the reasons why you did this, and that you were a very good daughter by doing this, and that you have your sister to lean on as well. So I would echo some of the same things we said a little bit earlier about creating a familiar environment. So think about, is there furniture or anything that you have from your original setting that you can incorporate into the setting that you're in now, even if it's similar items. That's the other thing, is sometimes people are missing, maybe it's even a pillow or a throw pillow or a blanket or just something little. Those things can be duplicated or replicated. Even if it's not the exact same thing, you could still get the same color or the same size or style or something like that. Again, pulling out pictures and just think about ways that you can make your mother feel like this is her home now. How can you help her feel more at home in your sister's house now? What are some things that you can do? Is there some familiar routines? Is there some familiar meal times? I would try to keep things as similar as they were in the past. So if you and your mom always got up, Lisa, every day at 9 and you read the paper and had coffee, keep trying to do that at your new location, at your sister's house, for example. So again, she may be lashing out at you because she's nervous, maybe forgetting why she moved and where she is now. So anything that you can do to reassure her and make her feel like this is her home, it's going to go a long way. And Lisa, I wish you luck. I know I can't imagine how hard it is when your mom is lashing out on you. I mean, that's incredibly hard. And so I do hope the situation gets better. And I don't want you to think about it as a mistake, because you have to do what's right for your family and for your journey that you're on.
Absolutely. And Molly, I think we see many times the person with Alzheimer's lashes out at the person they're closest with.
Absolutely. That is
I
very
think
common.
There's a level of comfort knowing that, I can lash out and it's still going to be okay.
Yes.
We have a comment on this question from Robert, and I think it's a great tip. Lisa, you may need to remove yourself from the home for, a long weekend, maybe reconnect with some friends for a long weekend, and let mom rebond with your sister. Let her build that comfort level with your sister as well. So thanks for that tip.
Yeah, that's a great tip.
Okay, we have a question that came in from Darlene, and it looks like she is caring for her spouse. And she's wanting to know, Molly, what should she look for when choosing a long-term care facility for her spouse who has Alzheimer's?
That's a great question, Darlene. And I think I definitely have worked in that arena, so I know I have some really great tips for you today. But I would like you to think about when you're choosing a place, there's a lot of different things to consider, and there's actually a fairly decent amount of information on the internet or in your local newspaper. They hand out these free guides sometimes that talk about questions to ask when you're at the facility and things to look for. And so I don't want to reiterate a lot of those because they're very in-depth, these questionnaires that you can find to ask about different questions. But there's some big things that I just want to cover with you today. Number one being, really try to understand if this is a facility that specializes in Alzheimer's care. And I say that because there are facilities that have people that have Alzheimer's disease in them, but they may not necessarily be set up to help somebody with Alzheimer's disease on an ongoing long-term basis. So let me give you one example. Assisted living facilities are usually, they have a security system and they have front doors that lock at a certain time at night, and they have all the side doors that might go out to a courtyard. Those are usually all locked and can be locked. Just because a facility is locked, though, does not necessarily mean it's secure and it's the best for somebody that has Alzheimer's disease that may wander. So that's just one example. So I would definitely try to understand if the facility specializes or maybe has a designated area, or sometimes they call them neighborhoods, that are for people that have Alzheimer's disease or dementia. A lot of times when you find a facility that does have a specialization, the staff is specially trained. And the staff maybe has more training in Alzheimer's, and maybe there isn't even a unique approach that the facility might use. So I would say with this unique situation with Alzheimer's disease, I would definitely, do your due diligence on checking about the specialties of the facility. The other recommendation that I would say, there's two more things. One is the staffing ratio. When you go to facilities, that's usually a number one question that it would be on the top of my list. And it's a lot of times when I worked in a facility, a question I got often is, what is the staffing ratio? So how many residents go towards each staff person? So if there's 10 staff members that night, how many people does each staff member are they, quote, in charge of or are monitoring? So obviously you want smaller staffing ratios, because the smaller means that there's one staff member to 5 people maybe, or if it's a 1 to 7, that's probably a pretty good ratio. So I would definitely be considering that, Darlene, when you're going through and looking at different facilities. And then the final recommendation I would give, sort of just on a high-level basis, is definitely go on a tour, which I'm sure you would do. But I would encourage you to almost stop in at different times. I would go on an initial tour and see the whole building, but then I would pop back in during a random time, and maybe not a meal time. I would spend your initial tour during a meal time so you can see the food, you can smell the food, you can see what happens at mealtime. It's a really important part of the day, and nutrition is very, very important for your senior loved one. And a lot of times facilities will even let you come and bring your senior loved one and have a lunch, so consider that. But I would also pop in at different times throughout the day when it's not a meal time, so people are maybe not in the common areas. And I would just walk around and really get a feel for the place during those different times. So again, just to reiterate, I would definitely do some due diligence on if they are a facility that has specializes in Alzheimer's or dementia, and the way to note that is to check with the training, what kind of training and special training does the staff have. Second, I would definitely check about the ratio to staff to resident. And then third, again, I would pop in at different times, and I would really get a feel for the culture and the feel and of the building and what happens and the different activities and the meals, like I said. So I hope that helps out, Darlene. Kat, I don't know if you've had other comments to share as well.
Yeah, those are great tips. And I want to be sure, for those, everyone who's listening, don't discount in-home care. We have many clients with Alzheimer's who have that one-on-one caregiver. It's so much more affordable than you think. And really a great resource in your community is your local Homestead Senior Care. They can help you decide, is this something that we can manage at home with the caregiver? If it's not, they have great relationships with many of your local facilities, and so they can be a great insight into that search as well. So don't hesitate to contact your local Homestead Senior Care and get their tips and talk with them as well.
That's a great tip, Kat, as well.
Okay.
I do also think that when you're at the facilities, please feel free to interact with other residents that are there. Maybe you've found other family members. When I worked in a facility, I had families say to me, is there somebody, a resident or a family member that I can call and talk to? And I would give them a list of 2 or 3 names that I know that would be okay with a call from a prospective resident. So that is available too, to really get an insider's take from a family is a great tip as well.
Great. We've got a couple of questions that came in, that have come in through email. One that I want to get to real quick before we start to wrap things up is from Glenda. And her question is, her mom has been having dreams of people that have passed away. And when she wakes up the next morning, she's sad and talks about it. But Glenda doesn't know how to answer her or what to do.
Wow, that's a great question, Glenda. And I've actually had that occur a few times in my career and in my experience. And the interesting part about dreams is the interesting part is some people have them, many people don't, and so it doesn't come up very often. So this is interesting. I think when she wakes up sad, she'll talk about it, but you don't know how to answer it. I guess I would think about, what is she saying and what is she sad about? My intuition or guess would be that she's probably sad because she misses the person, because I think, yes, Kat, that she mentioned that they had passed away. So yeah, my first inclination is that she misses somebody. And this goes for when you're working or caring for anybody that has Alzheimer's disease and they talk about somebody that's passed away. And we talked earlier about just being present and don't really tell them, oh, why are you talking about so-and-so? They've died. It's more of a, tell me about this person some more. What did you love about them? What's your favorite memory of this person? And so try to turn it into a little bit of a happier memory. If she's waking up sad, really try to understand what is it that what I would guess is that she misses the person, and that's why she's sad. And so talking about the person that she dreamt about, talking about the memories, trying to think about happier times, and trying to even tell a funny story about the person. That's how I would approach that situation, and that's how I've approached it in the past with my own grandmother. That happened with her one time.
Molly, I don't know if you recall my experience with my grandmother was having delusions that my, at the time, 1-year-old son had died. And that day that she was having the delusion was the day of his funeral, and she was going on, and it was terrifying, and for me, but yes, she was just very sad, and she had experienced the loss of a child in her life, and so I fortunately was able to recognize what was going on, and we sat and talked about, what a happy baby he was, and, we looked at pictures, and that would satisfy her for a while, and, eventually she'd go back into that same delusion, and but it was just, her sadness was over, feeling like she had missed him, and once we talked about the happy things about him, yes, it really solved that.
Great. So yeah, and you're right though, Kat. You made a great point that it may only last a little while. They may get sad again. Yeah. So yeah, it's just one of those things where I would definitely try to bring up the happy memories again, or try to redirect to a different topic, a different subject, even if it's like, let's get up now and go into the kitchen and have tea. You're even changing directions. You're leaving the situation. Sometimes that is enough to really get the person to think about something completely different. So those are great tips.
Molly, I want to make sure that we don't run out of time before we let people know about some of the resources
Sure,
that are available to them. So I want to touch on those before we get to maybe one more question. So if you're logged in online, you'll see some of the resources that you can expect, and you'll see these in the email, and obviously can listen to the recording of this webinar as well. Our website, helpforalzheimersfamilies.com, is full of great resources. We've got training that's available. So if you feel like maybe you need some help on, geez, I'm just really not sure what to do in certain situations, there's great training. You can find in-person training with Homestead. You can find, there's a great online training available. We also have some experts who answer your questions there, as well as blogs, tips, support. So that is really kind of the go-to site for Alzheimer's family caregivers. That is also where, if you're looking for some respite care, Homestead Senior Care has teamed up with Hilarity for Charity, which is an Alzheimer's Association charity, to offer grants to families caring for someone with Alzheimer's. So if you'd like to apply for a grant for respite care, you can do so at helpforalzheimersfamilies.com. You can also go to confidencetocare.com to learn more about Molly's book. It really is so easy to use, Molly. I love the way you have it set up. It's think of what is the behavioral symptom that you're struggling with, and that's how it's laid out. So hostility, you just flip open to hostility, and there's everything you need to know. So you don't have to hunt and peck for that information. And of course, we want you to come on over if you're on Facebook and join, like our page. That's facebook.com/rememberforalzheimers. It's another great place to get information, hopefully a little inspiration, and really have a community who knows what you're going through gather around you. And we have already scheduled March's live chat, so we're excited about that. We're going to be talking about managing the unexpected. And I think probably a lot of you are thinking, that's my everyday. Every day is managing the unexpected. So Dr. Amy Dupree is going to be our guest expert. You can register for this chat at the helpforalzheimersfamilies.com. And as always, you can email your questions to livechat@homestead.com ahead of time or during the chat, or you can ask your questions live. Molly, we have run out of time today. It has been such a quick hour.
Yes, it has.
Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for your insight. It's been a great hour full of awesome tips.
Thank you for having me, and thanks everybody who joined the call today. I hope we've given some great tips to you to ease your caregiving journey a little bit. And I just always like to say thank you so much for the work you're doing for caring for somebody with Alzheimer's disease or dementia. It's like I said in the beginning, it's a very, very tough job, but very rewarding, and we're very grateful you're on this journey.
Absolutely. Thanks, Molly, for joining us. Thanks all of you for taking time out of your day to join us and ask your questions and offer your tips. Shoot us an email. Join us on Facebook. Otherwise, we'll see you next month. Bye-bye.